One of my favourites is I don't know what you call it, but just like you yank them towards you and then just get your tricep in straight away. So good at it. Just the second I get that tricep in, it's just like you're done.
Eddie the Beast Hall is planning to retire Brian Shaw. He's planning to end Brian's arm wrestling career even before it begins. And I'll say if Brian defeats Eddie, then it still wouldn't really tell us anything about the potential of these two strongmen. But if somehow Eddie manages to beat Brian, which seems highly unlikely as of now, but if it happens, then I'll say that Brian doesn't really have the potential in arm wrestling, at least not to the extent which everyone is talking about. And the plain, simple reasoning behind this logic is Eddie and Brian were pretty close in arm wrestling without any actual training for arm wrestling. So now, after Brian has trained for many months and Eddie would be training only for a couple of months when the match happens, if Eddie still manages to beat Brian, then I'll say he definitely has more potential than Brian Shaw in arm wrestling, because the first year is when you make the most gains in arm wrestling. And Eddie still beating Brian would say that it may not look like that physically, but he definitely has more potential. And Eddie mentioned a pretty similar thing on the recent Core Sports podcast. He said that Brian has been training solid for arm wrestling for 1 year now, and he will be training only for 8 weeks. If he still beats him, then he's going to rub it in his face forever. He mentioned that even now, every once in a while, every other week, he keeps on texting Brian about how he beat him in the strongman days. So imagine what happens if he beats him in arm wrestling. He's going to rub it in Brian's face forever until the end of days. If Brian loses to me after 8 weeks of training, that makes him the biggest fucking flop in arm wrestling history. So all the pressure is on him. It's cool to see that Eddie is not taking pressure on himself, and he's also training for some fighting match. I'm not really sure if he was talking about boxing or MMA match, but he's still training for it. That kind of shows us that he isn't really taking arm wrestling that seriously. It's probably just a fun gig for him. It's probably just a money gig for him. But at least I like the guy's honesty. He said that I was offered a good match by Core Sports. Why not take the offer? Why not have some fun? At least he's not pretending to be falling deeply in love with arm wrestling and then leaving it a few years later. So let's talk about Eddie's chances of winning this King of the Table super match. He said that he has already defeated Brian Shaw on the left arm after World's Strongest Man 2018. It wasn't an official match, but there was a genuine ready go. So it was as official as it can unofficially get. Eddie did end up winning that left arm match, but for about 3 months, both Eddie and Brian couldn't do anything with their left arm. It hurt so much. And even now for this Brian Shaw match, his wrist was hurting for 1 week and that is gone now. Usually the beginners feel the most pain in their elbows and their upper arm, but Eddie doesn't seem to be dealing with that as of now. He's training for arm wrestling 5 days a week and taking weekends off, and at least once a week table time with Neil Pickup, who's probably taking this match more seriously than even Eddie Hall. He's really into this match. He wants his guy to win. As I've already shown you in the clip, Eddie's move seems to be engage back pressure first, then maybe tire your opponent out and jump with your tricep press. That seems to be working for him, and he's really confident that if he gets into that move, it's already over for Brian. And he also mentioned that his upper body strength has always been better than Brian Shaw. Even now, in all of the upper body lifts, his weights are leaps and bounds above Brian, and that he believes is going to help him in arm wrestling. And if somehow this match comes down to endurance game, then Eddie thinks that it is already over for Brian Shaw. It's not even worth fighting because Eddie's endurance is great since the swimming days. Even in strongman competition, he never lost any competition which involved repping the weights many times. He's undefeated in that kind of situation. So I would say that Brian needs to dominate this match. If the match stops even for a few seconds, let's say more than 5 seconds, then the Brian Shaw stocks are going to take a fall for sure. And my question to the arm wrestling community is, if Eddie beats Brian, then is everyone going to shift their focus on Eddie Hall, saying that he's also going to defeat Levan, or people are going to think that maybe Brian was just overhyped? That's a genuine question, because we may still say that because of the forearm length, hand size, grip strength, Bryan still may have more potential than Eddie, but it seems highly unlikely if that happens. Thanks for watching, like the video and subscribe.